Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. In our innovation and tech segment brought to you by Caldwell Soames, we have returning contributor Paul Caldwell, chairman and CEO of Caldwell Soames. And today we are chatting with Robby Yung, CEO of North American operations at Animoca Brands, a global leader in blockchain games. And today we're chatting about reshaping game experiences, the monetization process in Web 3.0, and how blockchain games are the strongest category among crypto market and even during the downturn. Now, blockchain games is the category within crypto that has resisted the industry's downturn the most, with actively still being up close to 200% year over year. And one of these spaces, Web3, is expected to impact profoundly is, in fact, the gaming industry. Previously, video game publishers mostly made their money from sales of physical or digital copies of their games, plus whatever associated merchandise they could conjure up. As for players, the only benefit they got from games was largely the enjoyment they derived from playing. Now, gamers spend bucket loads of money on game titles, in-game items, and even additional downloadable content, otherwise known as DLC. However, these games and whatever in-game items players bought often lost whatever value they had as soon as the player finished or grew tired of the game, since they never really owned anything they bought in the game. Now, with the emergence of Web3 and its associated technologies such as blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and NFTs, the traditional monetization model for gaming is set to be turned on its head. So let's review. Blockchains are immutable ledgers that securely record every single transaction on a network and allow for the creation of NFTs. Now, NFTs represent unique and verifiable data tied to virtually anything, including in-game assets such as weapons, costumes, avatars, and even virtual land. Now, with Web3, NFT-based games can be moved across different platforms and sold to other players on secondary marketplaces, fueling an entire secondary economy and giving rise to what we are pegging as the creator economy. And here to chat some more are Paul Caldwell and Robby Yung. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hi, Zen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Robby, some Web3 games can also offer opportunities for players to earn passive income through the staking and yield farming of in-game cryptocurrencies. So players receiving tangible financial rewards for the time and effort put into games is a profound premise that will offset the inequality that has existed for so long in the gaming space. It will also represent a relatively risk-free avenue for introducing millions of people to crypto. How is Animoca empowering and paving the way for the gaming community for gamers to access highly valued and often inaccessible NFTs required to partake in play-to-earn games as we enter Web 3.0?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think on the first part, we make games, obviously, and we focus on blockchain games. And I think from our perspective, the whole premise of blockchain games is that we give digital property rights to gamers. And in so doing, we make, the whole environment and ecosystem much more fair because customers get what they pay for. And I think this sounds odd at first until you start to think about exactly what you get in traditional sort of what we call Web 2 games, which is you actually get a license to use content in the game, but you don't really own it. You don't have agency over it. You can't sell it. You can't trade it. You can't bring it to another game. It's your digital stuff, so you should have agency over it. So that's the fundamental difference in blockchain games. Now, once you tokenize those in-game assets, because they are tokens, that means there's a relatively easy interoperability with other types of blockchain standards. So we've seen very innovative applications being developed by other players in the space to build on top of the assets that we create for our games. So fun things like, you can take playable NFTs from our games and go and put them up as collateral for DeFi loans at NiftyFi and other protocols. And so it's interesting to see how all these services can work together as we build out this wider ecosystem.
It's, and you are building out quite the large ecosystem. I mean, you are dabbling in a lot. When you look at Animoca Brands as a leader in digital entertainment, blockchain, and gamification, I see that you guys are producing a diverse range of products, including the Rev and Sand tokens, original games like the Sandbox, Crazy Kings, and Crazy Defense Heroes, which are so popular, and items based on popular intellectual rights, such as Disney, WWE, and Snoop Dogg. I mean, you guys are the next level. So hat off to you. All right, Paul, all of these blockchain games are communities, and many of them are set up so players can earn cryptocurrency there that they can exchange for fiat, known as real money. Now, cryptocurrencies have become extremely popular due to the ideals of decentralization that they convey, along with potentially outsized gains, but their volatility remains high, and these assets carry a greater risk of losses than many traditional assets. I think we're not at a mass adoption yet, but we're definitely at mass acceptance. Now, for those who have done their research and decided that crypto is right for them, it's definitely a good time to jump into the investment now. And GameFi is at the heart of it all. Talk to me about how tightly cryptocurrency really correlates to the investment markets, and what's the impact of the correlation on different asset classes?
Well, I think you have to look at cryptocurrency as an asset class in and of itself, and with sectors inside of it. If you want to look at tokens, for example, Animoca Brands is a great example of. I look at Animoca as a garage.com back in the 90s. It's, I mean, they invest in startup, and they invest in startup and venture level companies, and so they're basically to me they're a venture capital fund in the cryptocurrency space. And companies like that will yield accordingly. Inside that, when you start to talk about tokenization and creating tokens and fungible tokens versus non-fungible tokens, I think the correlation to the broader markets isn't as tight as many would think. I believe Bitcoin is an example, has shown up actually recently more tightly correlated to the NASDAQ in the tech space than ever before in the last 60 days, just the last 60 days. But if you look at those correlates, you'll find that there are some that are really obviously showing up. So there are correlations starting to actually develop. But you have to understand that the markets, the global markets, were around long before cryptocurrency was ever invented. They're just fine. They're used to massive dips and massive runs and bulls and bears, and they've been around for a long time. In the crypto space, the bulls and the bears and how to deal with all of that in a proper way has never been really defined. I mean, it's simply like, oh, crypto's below 20, I'm a buyer. Oh, Jesus, at 60, I'm a seller. It's these kinds of things that really happen, and so tokens have to be able to move into the real world where real people live. You know, there's simple analogies. I'm not a big believer in some of your more traditional industry standards in the capital market space that think that cryptocurrency is an anathema. I don't believe that. I think it's absolutely not. I think it's showing up significantly well for its purpose. I just think its purpose hasn't been completely defined. It doesn't really have all that tight of a correlation to global financial markets at this particular juncture, but it's embryonic, and it can. It just doesn't right now because it doesn't have the any way to really collateralize effectively with that. I think Celsius lately is a great example of trying to collateralize with cryptocurrency. It's just it's either a bad idea well executed, or it's an excellent idea poorly executed. I don't know which, but these things happen all the time in this space. A lot of risk,
and still in infancy stage. And so we have to really pay close attention to all of these market cues here. Robby, Axie Infinity turned its game into a billion-dollar economy that helped thousands of players in the Philippines and other low-income countries to weather the fallout from pandemic mitigation measures, so to speak. And the main ingredient for success, strong property rights. Except, as of recently, Axie Infinity Sky Mavis reports find that the game has surpassed 2 million daily active users, but the majority of players are found in Southeast Asia, with only 10% in the US and a remaining 20 to 25% across Europe and Africa. Now, there's one particular barrier for Axie Infinity players. You need to buy 3 free Axie characters to be able to play the game and earn rewards. And these NFTs are now fetching at around $400 each, pricing out many potential players. So this model doesn't seem very fair to me and rather offensive to the game. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think it's one of those things which is, I guess you could call it an unintended consequence, but it's the consequence of having a fixed supply economy. So when you don't have inflation and you don't keep quote unquote printing new stuff, asset value increases. It's the nature of the game. So as the user base grows and the number of Axies was relatively finite, the value increased. So actually, one of the reasons that most of those players in the Philippines are playing is because of an innovation created by a friend of ours who has a company now called Yield Guild Games. And what he did was create software to help him to rent his Axies to other players because he had a surplus of Axies. He was a super fan and he had lots of Axies, and he's like, look, let me try to figure out a way through software that I can actually allow my friends, in my local community to use my Axies because I'm not using them. And so he came up with what we now call guild software. So you can join a guild and be able to participate in this economy without actually having to own the individual Axie characters. A little bit like renting a car to drive for Uber.
I love it that you just taught me something I didn't even know. All right, cool. Paul, let's go back to your area of expertise here. So under its contractionary monetary policy efforts, right? The US Fed is trying to fight inflation by raising short-term interest rates. Basically, the US Fed is trying to decrease spending in the US economy. Right now, if you look at historically these impacts, you could clearly see, right, that where we are right now, it feels very tight. What impact does the U.S. Federal Reserve raising interest rates have on digital assets and companies developing in the digital asset sector?
We find in our portfolio companies that are in the digital asset space, whether it's in fintech or whether it's in the tokenization or even digital rights, these different areas in that sector. What we find is that, first of all, we believe the U.S. Fed's not done raising rates. We actually think they have to get to about 1.5 before it even starts to get close to their goal of 2%. In the US. Now, a lot of people in other markets outside the US think this doesn't impact us. I've heard it from actually digital asset companies, cryptocurrency companies. This doesn't affect us. I think they're wrong. I believe that if they really understood economics, and not even just macroeconomics, but just economics and econometrics, they would have to start to realize that when the US Fed raises rates, there are informed impacts on foreign markets, because what happens is the US dollar gets stronger against those foreign currencies in those markets. So if you're going to have someone with cryptocurrencies that has to use their liquidity in euro or in rand in South Africa, for example, or even in HKD, which is really kind of closely aligned with US peg, DPEG, you're going to see some impact, because those people now that want to go buy those tokens or buy those currencies are going to be less likely to just jump in and use their fiat money to acquire those so they can get into those games or into those environments as that pressure continues. At 0.75, it's already showing up. It just was announced, I think, the day before yesterday. Yesterday, already starting to see impacts in Japan and in the global financial markets, the effect of 0.75. The Fed has to go well beyond 0.75, in our opinion, to actually get anywhere near where they want to be, unless, of course, we start to see some market-based adjustments that actually get created, but doesn't seem like it's trending that direction at the moment. So I think there is an impact.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because we're almost out of time. We're going to come back from a commercial break. But although the recent hike was welcomed by the crypto markets, with the global market cap zooming over 5% and cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ether, Cardano, all of them witnessing spikes, in the long run, as per historical data, it seems like the reduction in spending also causes a reduction in investing, to your point. And as per data from Coin Market Cap that I recently read, ever since the US Fed began raising interest rates, the price of Bitcoin has fallen by 40%. So there you have it. We are out of time. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. Robby, always a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
Guys, you definitely have to check out Animoca Brands. Head to their website. That was Robby Yung, CEO of Animoca Brands, and check out his Twitter. He's always very active on Twitter at View from HF. That was Innovation and Tech segment brought to you by Caldwell Soames. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this.